Hey students, Eric Magidson here again. Part 3, last part of the functions that you should know for Microsoft Excel 2010, the basic functions. So all these functions are really basic functions that you could see using on a daily basis within business. So let's go ahead and trail through part 3. We're going to look at the lookup functions. We're going to do a link, some future value, hugely important. These are ones I really want you to focus on. So let's go ahead and get started. What we're going to do is we've got this table over here, and we want to look up a value in the table based on the number of years the employee was employed. Now, where might you use this in business? Well, this could be the number of dependents, and we want to return a tax rate based on the number of dependents that a person has. So there's where we might use it. In this case, what I want to do is return a bonus for Kate, who's worked there 10 years. Well, I could easily go over the table and say, oh, Kate's been here 10 years, okay, and so she gets 500, and I could type 500 in there. But I only have 16 employees. But what if I had 3,000 employees? Can you imagine doing this for 3,000 employees and not making a mistake? Well, as easily as we could do it for 16, once we do the first one and fill down, we could just fill down 3,000 spots. So let's take a look at the formula we're going to use. We are going to use a formula called the lookup formula, but we're going to use a specific lookup formula based on the table. In this case, our table is formatted vertically instead of horizontally. We'll look at one of those in a minute. So I'm going to use the VLOOKUP function. And it says, is the lookup value is the value to be found in the first column of the table? Well, the value I want to be found is her years employed. Is that in the first column of the table? It is. Now, notice that we have 1. What happened to 2, 3, and 4? Well, I'll show you what happened in just a minute. From here, we want the table array, which is the table where we want to look up our values. Now, what we need to do here is we need to make this absolute. We need to make sure that the table absolutely and always stays as H2 through J7. So I'll make it absolute. Now the column index is the column in the table array from which the matching value should be returned. Well, we'll never return anything out of the first column. Notice it's not column H here. We're looking at the table independently of where it shows up on the spreadsheet. So this is column 1, column 2, and column 3. I would never return column 1 because that's what I'm looking up. I already have that information. So in this case, what I want to return is column 2. I want to return the bonus amount. Now the lookup range, remember I said, well, wait a minute, we don't have a 2, 3, and 4. That means what we're going to do is find the closest match. Anyone that was employed 1 through 4 years would get the $100 bonus. As soon as they hit the 5th year, they move up to $250. But it's not till they hit the 10th year, even at 9 years, 364 days, they're not getting the 10-year bonus. They're going to get the $250 5-year bonus. So in this case, and read down below here, is a logical value. To find the closest match in the first column stored in ascending order, which it is, 1 to 25, equals true or omitted, which means if I don't put anything in this box, it's going to assume we want to find the closest match. Remember what I said about assuming. We never want to assume, so I'm always going to fill it in. Then it says, find an exact match. We'll put false. Well, we can't find an exact match for 14 for Sophie because it's not in the table. So we know in this case, we don't want to use an exact match. Where do we use exact matches? When we're looking up text. It's very important to use exact matches when we're looking up text. So in this case, we're done. It says 500. I'll audit it real quick. She's been here 10 years, should get 500. I'll say okay. Now I'm going to go ahead and fill this down, and I'll audit the last person here. Last person here worked 17 years. Looks like the bonus is 1,000. Yep, because they have yet to make 20 years. Now the next thing I want to do is based on the same years, they have a quota. So if they've worked 5 years, their quota is 2,000 in sales. I'm going to come over here and quickly use the VLOOKUP function again. The lookup value is going to be the same in years. The table is going to be the same. Now, folks, if you want, go ahead and look up other lookup functions. a lot of folks like to go ahead and name the table, name the range that the table's in. So instead of having to make it absolute, they can just call the name of the range. We'll get to that in the Excel book a little later so that you'll understand it. In this case, column index, well, I don't want to return 1 ever. I've already returned 2, so in this case, I want to return 3. And again, I'm not going to find an exact match, but a close match, because there's not a 4, right? So in this case, it looks like the quota should be 3,000 for her. Well, 10 years, 3,000 quota. That looks to be correct. I'll go ahead and fill that down. Now, the last thing we want to do is, using the above information, insert a function in the blue cells that returns yes if the employee met their quota and no if the employee did not. See all those ifs in there? That should be a clue. The if statement. If the employee met the quota, say yes. If the employee didn't meet the quota, say no. Well, I'll come up here real quick and use the function arguments box and find the if function. So there it is right there. The logical test. Any expression that can be evaluated to true or false. Well, in this case, my test is their total sales greater than or equal to their quota? In this case, it says it's true. Well, yeah, the total sales is more than the quota. So if it's true, we want to say yes. And if it's false, we want to say no. Now, let me quickly go down here real quick in the means of auditing. Here's someone whose total sales is not greater than or equal to their quota. Yes, if they sold 4,000 and the quota was 4,000, they met the quota, right? Didn't say their quota had to be greater than 4,000. It just said it had to be 4,000. So I'll say okay. And you know what? I wanted to put this function in that silly box up there. So here's what I'm going to do. I'm going to just copy it and paste it in. Whoops. It must have changed. I'll just do it again real quick. So I'll say if logical test, if the sales is greater than or equal to the quota, we'll say yes. If it's not, we'll say no. It's been a long day, folks. I'm going to fill this down. And there we are. There's a no. There's another no. Yep, didn't meet the quota. So I've audited it. I know it's right. Here's lookup 2. Now this one should just look a little bit different. I'm going to go ahead and get rid of some of the space here. Just delete those columns. Is the table horizontal or vertical? It's horizontal, right? So I can't do this via VLOOKUP. I'm going to use HLOOKUP. Horizontal lookup. I go by the table. So here's a horizontal lookup. And it's exactly really very close to a vertical lookup. So the lookup value, I want to look up the percentage. Now notice, do I have a 61.21% in my table? No, I've got something close. So remember down at the bottom here, that true false is going to come in handy. Our table array is going to be now, this is our array. I again am going to make it absolute. And instead of the column to return, it's the row. Well, I don't want to return row 1 because that's what I'm looking up. So I'm going to return row 2. If you said 2, you're absolutely right. Here I'm looking for a close match because I'm not going to find an exact match for 61.21. Said that this person should get a D, and indeed they should. We'll say, okay, I'll fill it down. Last person should get an A, I see. The last person does get an A. I don't have any values missing. I'm in good shape. So take this slow, and you're going to get it. Trust me. Remember, you can always undo and do them again. So I just got rid of some columns so that we can see this all on my shortened view here. Again, it's a horizontal lookup. This time we're going to return bonus. Row 1, row 2, row 3. No bonus for Fs, no bonus for Ds. Looks like $5 for Cs, $6. Ooh, I want an A. Yeah, I'm going to earn an A. for sure. I like 15 bucks. What could I do with 15 bucks? Horizontal lookup. The lookup value is going to be that person's value, the table array. I'm going to choose the whole table minus the headings. This time I'm going to return 3, and I'm going to find a close match again. That person gets no money. They got a D. Next person shouldn't get any money, but the last person should get 15 bucks. Wow, not a lot of money down here. All right, let's move on to something else. So again, practice this. Make sure you can go out to YouTube, find a ton of other videos that support this if you're unable to really grasp the concept by the examples that I provided. It says, create a link in the yellow cell that links to A82 on LPGA 6. This is actually pretty easy, folks, once I show you how to do it. We're going to insert a hyperlink, right? A hyperlink. But instead of linking out to a web page, we want to link to a place in this document. The place we want to link to is A82 in LPGA 6. LPGA 6, cell A82. We say OK. Now notice here's the text to display. So if I wanted to have it say something besides LPGA2, I might say, link to LPGA6, for example. I'll say OK. Notice it says, I'll widen this, link to LPGA6, A82 of LPGA6. Let me click on the link, and notice it takes me to A82 of LPGA6. Isn't that pretty cool? So we can link back and forth within the document. Always a good idea when we're referencing a value from another page to give the user an easy way to get there. And don't forget, we might on A82 might want to put a link to link back here. So, future value function. A lot of other videos on this, so I'm going to go through it real quick. Future value function is the idea that what is the value of my money in the future, essentially. So each month, I'm going to make a $275 payment for 13 years. So remember, that's 13 years times 12 months, right? And I'm going to get an interest rate of 5.25%. Well, there's a formula for this, and it is called the future value function. So I'm just going to come over here. It's FV, and I'll say go. And it says future value returns the future value of an investment based on periodic constant payments. What's the period? In this case, every month, right? Constant payments, $275, and a constant interest rate. In this case, 5.25. So that's the function I want. I'm going to open it up. Rate is the interest rate per period. For example, 6 divided by 4 for quarterly payments at 6%. Well, my interest rate is 5.25, but I'm going to make those monthly, so my interest rate is 5.25 divided by 12 for a monthly interest rate. My number of periods is the total payment periods in the investment. Well, I'm going to do that for 13 years, but I'm going to do it every month. So 13 times 12 will give me 156 months. The payment I make, now here's something I want to point out. The accountants got involved in Excel and kind of messed it up. When you're making a payment, okay, they call that a debit. That's money going out of your account. So they want to see a negative value. Well, what I do to make a positive value is I just put a negative value, because we know a negative times a negative is a positive. A negative before I put in the monthly payment. Now, we don't need to do anything with present value, but I would have you look these up to figure out what it means for present value and what's the type of the loan, okay? Type of the loan being, when did I make the payment? Did I do it at the beginning of the month or the end of the month? Because if I do it at the beginning of the month, I get interest for the whole month. If I do it at the end, I don't get any interest for that month, correct? So the things in bold are the things we need. There we are. There's the value. Okay. Now I want to encourage you all to go ahead and do each and every one of these. I'm going to paste them in and widen it up. And let's just look at this one here. We'll audit this one. It says the rate is in K3 divided by 12, so the interest rate divided by 12, right? The number of periods, K4 times 12, and then negative, so that's correct. And there's my amount. So that's future value. Now I'm going to leave this to you. I'm going to have you do these. Notice there's a difference here. Every other month. So how many payments am I going to make in a year if I'm paying every other month? 6? In which case I need to take the interest rate and not divide it by 12, but an every other month. So I would divide this by 6, and I would then multiply the years by 6, because every other month I'm going to make a payment, so I'll make 6 payments in a year. So in 13 years, I'll make 6 times 13 payments, right? 6 payments a year times 13 years. Notice here, every 4 months, bi-monthly, twice a month, and quarterly, 4 times a year. So I'm going to leave that to you to figure out. So let's go ahead and do payment functions. A payment function is just like figuring out how much I'm going to buy a car for, how much I might buy a house for, etc. Okay? So in this case, I've got this short-term loan. I'm going to borrow $2,000 at a rate of 5.25% for 1 year. So if I'm going to borrow it, I then have to repay it. I'm going to make monthly payments in this case. Well, the function I want to use is called a payment function. And this is really very, very similar to the future value function. The only difference is with the future value function, I was saving my money. In this case, the bank's loaning me money and they expect something in return. What they expect is $2,000 plus whatever the interest is on the $2,000 while I paid for the loan. So I'm going to go ahead and say go. There's the payment function, and I'm going to read carefully. Rate is the interest rate per period for the loan. Well, I'm going to make monthly payments. So I'm going to take the interest rate, and just like I did before, I'm going to divide it by 12. Because when we calculate the monthly interest, they can't continue to charge me interest on $2,000 when I've started to pay back some of the principal. Number of periods? Well, it'll be 1 year times 12. Could I have just put in 12? Absolutely, but I like to keep it consistent throughout every single formula I do. The present value, the amount I'm going to pay, again, I'm going to do a negative, so I get a positive result. The amount of loan, in this case, is $2,000, so that's the present value of the money is $2,000. We're going to figure out what the bank gets. Well, there's $171 a month that I'm going to pay. Well, let's do that. I'm going to come down here. I'm going to just transfer this number down here, and I'm going to do that times 12. So I'm going to say equals 171 times 12, because I'm going to pay for 1 year. I'm actually going to pay back $2,057.28. What's the difference? The difference is the interest. So the bank's going to make $57.28, letting me borrow $2,000 for a year. Now notice that's a pretty small interest rate, correct? Well, from here, I'm going to let you all figure out, I'm just going to put the values in here, what those are. But before we go any further, I want to show you the power of compounding real quick. I think it's real important, especially on money. Okay, so let's look at here. Let me just take, let me take this one here. Okay, let's say we started to invest in our future. All right, and we have only 22 years. We want to retire. Let me make this easy. You'll notice the value will change here. I'm going to make 6.75% on average for 20 years, putting away $50 a month. At the end, I would have $25,000. Well, that's not really enough to retire on, is it? Well, what happens if I had started saving just 10 years earlier? So instead of 20 years, I saved for 30 years. Watch the difference here. 58. So over double with just another 10 years. Let me take it back down to 20. Okay, I'm going to copy this value just so you have it. I'll put it down here. I'm going to just, I'll just paste the value in there. So that was the value. Investing for just another 10 years, which does mean, you know, I'm going to put $50 more away a month for 10 years. But that's $58,000. And I know what you're probably thinking. You're probably thinking, okay, but how much of that was money that I spent? Well, that's really easy to figure out. I'm just going to come down here and say $50, right? So I'm going to say equals 50 times the value of, let me think, 10 years times 12, right? So 120 basically. Oh yeah, you want another multiplication. So notice the $25,000 that I paid plus the $6,000 that I would pay for another 10 years in my investment has given me $58,000. So that's $25,000. Basically what, you know, what I had paid in difference there, there's that plus that. You know, my account would have been 31, but it's 58. Watch what happens if I had done something crazy, like when I was 20, just started to put away $50 a month. In 40 years, at 6 3/4%, I would have, yeah, that number's right, folks, $122,000. So you see, if you start investing early, you're going to make a lot of money because that money that you keep investing, the interest builds on it, and you get paid on the interest plus the additional money you're putting in. Hugely important, folks, that you go ahead and start saving for your retirement. Hopefully that makes sense to you. That really is the compounding value of interest. You can see, start investing early. Of course, this $50, every time you get a raise, you increase this each month. How are millionaires made? They save it. Take care, folks. So you've got that payment sheet. Here's some different ones. You're going to make a payment every other month. Every 4 months you make a payment bi-monthly. Now, for those of you that have houses, do this for me. Figure out what your amount of loan is. You could take like this one here, put in your interest rate. 30 years is pretty fixed. Put in your amount. See what happens if you make payments monthly and if you make payments bi-monthly. You might find out you save a little bit of money, or maybe you'll find out you don't. Take care, folks. We'll talk to you soon.